Welcome to AM Best Audio.
Cybersecurity is increasingly recognized as a major risk, with third-party vendors responsible for 63% of data breaches. As businesses grow and rely more on external vendors, traditional cybersecurity training focusing on phishing and email hygiene is no longer enough. The shift from perimeter-based cybersecurity to a more interconnected approach is essential, as the corporate perimeter now extends beyond the enterprise to include its business partners and third parties, according to the new book, Navigating Supply Chain Cyber Risk, a comprehensive guide to managing third-party cyber risk. For the insurance industry, this shift calls for more comprehensive risk assessment, policy development, and compliance strategies that consider third-party relationships and evolving cyber threats. I'm Lori Chortis for Ambest TV, and joining us now to discuss that and other findings from the book is one of the book's co-authors, Ariel Evans. She's CEO of Cyber Intelligence for You. Ariel, welcome. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Ariel, can you tell us a little bit about the book and how the idea for it came about?
Absolutely. So I've done numerous cyber risk assessments for third parties over the years. And what we've been noticing is that the companies many times don't even know where to begin to have a cyber program for third parties. These new regulations that are coming into effect all include language that encompasses third-party risk. And those that do have third-party risk programs don't have baselines and certainly are not meeting all of the requirements of the regulations. So what we did was we formed a group of over 200 CISOs, data privacy officers, cyber attorneys, and insurance experts to research this area, to understand where the issues were, where the gaps were, and to have a ready reference available for people to actually be able to develop policies, guidelines, and address these evolving compliance issues that we see in cyber risk management for vendors.
Wonderful. Well, can you tell us a little bit about today's evolving cyber landscape and what are some of the biggest challenges that organizations face today?
So cyber risks are extremely dynamic, and it makes it difficult for any organization, whether they're big or small, to ensure that their security systems are robust enough to withstand the constant barrage of cyber threats that are being unleashed by them every single day. In addition, we have new technologies like AI that are being introduced that create vulnerabilities. These new technologies are what cyber criminals attack. That's how they cause the financial damages to the businesses that result in insurance claims. And in the recent years, the enhanced capabilities to manage these threats have also evolved. So there's new techniques and ways that they can protect themselves with the associated risks that will make it difficult for these threat actors to gain access to their critical systems and their data. So we've seen a big uptick in third-party vendor breaches and third-party attacks. These criminals and threat actors have upped their game using different exploits that are going to actually decrease the amount of trust and the dependencies that most organizations have with third-party vendors. Sometimes up to 80 to 90% of an organization's resources are outsourced, as well as the technologies that they're utilizing, whether they're utilizing them in a cloud or they're utilizing an application on premise. The vendors are responsible to be updating those applications with security patches to make sure that the cyber criminals can't exploit the weaknesses that they have. And the organizations have increased their dependence on third parties over the years substantially. So when you look at the 63% breach number, that number is really in alignment with how much of the organization has been outsourced. So we really have a lot to be able to share with organizations about third-party risk and how to reduce it. And the book goes through everything from compliance and regulations to actually like what are the top things that you need to focus on to get started, and how do you baseline a current program in order to understand if it's effective or not.
Well, as you just mentioned, businesses are increasingly relying on third-party vendors. What steps should they take to assess and underwrite the cyber risk associated with these relationships?
Well, the first one is know your supply chain. Most organizations don't even have any idea how many vendors they have. The contracts may be in legal, they may not be in legal. If they're a hybrid organization, they may be sharing these vendors across the organization or not. So something called know your supply chain is something that we advocate that they start with. And that sets up some standards for them to understand what the vendor is doing for them, what kind of data they're interacting with, what kind of technologies they're providing, because that's going to equate to the risk. So that's the first step. The second step is to do something called a vendor due diligence. So vendor due diligence is identifying and taking it further to understand if you should be able to trust this vendor. Is this a high-risk vendor, a low-risk vendor, or something in the middle? And where is that risk? Is it because they're processing sensitive data? Is it because they're providing a specific service or product that is something that's client-facing, that if that product is unavailable, it will impact the reputation of the business? And most firms rely on procurement to manage the supply chain. However, with cyber, it's a completely different animal. Cyber is unique. It's not like managing other vendors because you have 80 to 90% of your business assets are now digital. We don't use paper anymore for the most part. So in the case of cyber risk, it's recommended that the technical team owns this piece of the procurement process when it comes to doing vendor due diligence and understanding what kinds of risks they're going to actually have to be measuring. A cloud service provider risk is very different than some type of an IT vendor who's providing that product on premise. The reason being is the cloud service provider is a shared responsibility model with the organization on the cyber controls. And in the case of the on-premise, the only thing that you really have to be more concerned about is the fact that are the patches not having malware? And I'll give some examples as we go along for the audience to understand like how this has been such a problem over the last couple of years.
Wonderful. Well, Ariel, as vendors, with them being responsible for 63% of data breaches, how should the insurance industry adapt its approach to cyber risk management to account for third-party vulnerabilities?
So this is an area I think that we really excel on providing information about, because up until a few years ago, no one was looking at the financial impacts that the businesses have, something that in insurance language is called maximum possible loss. And this is due, in a case of a data breach, to the number of sensitive records that can be stolen. The cost is directly related to that. So you have to know how many records you have, number one. And then when it comes to business interruption, like in the case of a ransomware, you have to understand which of your systems are business critical and be prepared with incident response to be able to actually mitigate the impact that that's going to have. The longer that that service or that product is unavailable, the more financial impact that it has. And the big one is regulation. Over the last 5 years, regulation has increased 950% in cyber, privacy, and industry regulations that are related to third parties. This incredible velocity is going to double in the next 5 years because all of our US states are actually implementing now in various forms of legislation today privacy requirements. And privacy requirements they're threefold. They're related to cybersecurity controls, just like in your cybersecurity program, but they're also related to process controls around business obligations that the company has, like posting privacy notices, having a data privacy officer, doing data minimization, as well as the individual rights of the consumer. So the individual right of the consumer is the ability to delete their data or the ability to update their data or to get a copy of their data. There's several of them. And understanding this complex interdependencies between all of these different requirements is key for insurance to know, well, what are we facing here in terms of insuring this individual company? And how are we going to help them to mitigate the risk? So what we really advocate is insurance companies becoming partners with their insureds to pull together the information and then to understand, okay, what are the things you can do to reduce these financial risks that you have from data breaches, business interruptions, and regulatory fines, because that's how claims are paid out. So that's very, very important. And that is something that we focus on a lot in our book.
Customize your data experience. BestLink now offers an interactive company dashboard that provides company-level intelligence in a fast, user-friendly interface featuring interactive tables, charts, and Sparkline performance histories. Customize the dashboard tiles to prioritize the insurer ratings, data, and analytics that best support your workflow. AM Best. Our insight, your advantage.
Traditional cybersecurity training often focuses on phishing and email hygiene, but what additional measures should businesses take to address third-party cyber risk?
So there's a lot of them. So cyber is typically, viewed as the boogeyman, right? It's like, oh, cyber, oh, yeah, it's a science. Okay. And we have taken that and conceptualized it and really unpacked it for both the insured and the insurance company to understand, what steps should you take. The first one is to have an inventory of all of the IT assets of the business. This is what the cyber criminal attacks. They exploit vulnerabilities in your systems and technologies. That leads to data breaches and to business interruptions and fines. And they are going to steal the data. So you need to know where the data is, where the sensitive data is. So having this digital asset inventory is the first step. Without this, you can't meet the privacy regulations because you need to know where the data lives to be able to delete them. And you don't know what that looks like in terms of the regulatory impacts that you might have. So identification of the goods and services that are being provided, the type of access that you're giving to these vendors. You don't want to give them administrative access. That means that they have full capabilities to get into your entire network. And understanding the criticality of the business process and determining how the vendor interacts with you. That's step one. So the identification of all the assets. Step two is identifying and mapping all those regulatory requirements to your program. So in other words, what you don't want to do is drive up the costs for your insured. So when you map the requirements across all the different regs, you can come out with one homogeneous program to do the assessments so that you're not spinning up a new privacy team for the state of Tennessee law or the state of Iowa law or the GDPR. It doesn't make sense. It just adds to the overhead of the organization. And that also helps them to ensure compliance with all of these different laws. Step three is to gather the data. Now, there's different ways to do this. Insurance companies have been using questionnaires, and the questionnaires is self-reporting. That's not the greatest way to do it because, of course, you're going to say, yes, I have this, and yes, I have this. And there's no validation. It's like you're trusting them to tell you all the information. And even if they're doing their best to do that, they may not understand the questions. They may not give the right information, and they may not give complete information. So there are new technologies that are out there that allow you to actually gather this control data automatically and to then feed it back to the insurance company. And it kills two birds with one stone for the insured, because what it does is the insured has an automated way of collecting the data, and that automated data is the same information of their risk assessment that is in those questionnaires. So you're putting them together, and so you're killing two birds with one stone again, reducing costs again. And then there's fourth parties. So the vendor has their own third parties. And so understanding, like, if it's a very high risk vendor, to get more information about the fourth parties is also something that I see no one is really looking at. But there's this interdependency of these IT assets on the organization itself, the third parties who directly provide the service or the product, and then the fourth parties who are providing those third parties with technologies or services as well. So minimizing the amount of data gathering by automation, and having this holistic, they call it a framework, that allows you to review the policies and procedures, look at the incident response plan and disaster recovery, make sure they're running tabletop exercises so that if they do have a disaster, they can recover, making sure, like, if they're a vendor that's providing you with the technology that you're using, that they're using software development, secure software development lifecycle, so that they're using all those best practices, making sure they vulnerability scan and pen test, and using threat intelligence, and of course, disclosing data breaches and vulnerabilities that they may have. And again, backing it up with evidence is key, not just taking someone's word for it that, yes, we have multi-factor authentication in place. I can't tell you how many times we've seen an organization say, yeah, we have MFA in place, but it's only on external facing systems. It's not on internal facing systems. And the law says it's both. It's like, and the best practice says it's both, right? And then looking at the risk profiles to understand, once you've got, in the insurance world, one of the things that they don't see is risk accumulation. So, like, as example, you're insuring cloud services, right? And you have 70% AWS and 30% Azure, let's just say. Well, if AWS has leaky S3 buckets and you have a cyber event, you're going to get 70% of your portfolio submitting a claim, and most likely 70% of that portfolio will have their claim paid. So it's really benefits the insurers, to understand the technology piece of this. And this is where the gap is with cybersecurity, third-party risk management, and insurance, and of course monitoring, right? So those are really the things that we are making sure that they understand what they are, and making sure they understand how to actually put them in place.
In the book, you discuss the shift from perimeter-based cybersecurity to a more interconnected model. How does this change the way businesses and insurers evaluate and manage cyber risks for their clients?
It puts third-party risk management in the forefront. It's the hacker's dream to launch a cyber attack that can impact more organizations by exploiting a single vulnerability and inflicting the maximum damage. And this has happened over the last several years. I'll give some examples. Many of you may remember in 2017, something called NotPetya. This is where the Russians attacked Ukraine. It's still happening, but what can we say? Hopefully it won't be happening any longer. And that had a domino effect on the insurance industry. What they did was they inserted something into an update of the software. And that software then was interconnected to all these other organizations. And that malware spread throughout all these networks and had various exploits that it could do, like stealing data or shutting things down. And this has been like now the attack du jour, let's just say, of these cyber criminals. And it happened with Orion SolarWinds. It happened with CC Cleaner software. It happened with Kaisha, excuse me. I always say that wrong. And it happened with all of those in 2020, 2021. And we're seeing that they're looking for these kinds of weaknesses in the third-party programs to do these types of exploits. And that is going to have a domino effect on insurance, as we saw with NotPetya. So the perimeter security, what that is, just to be clear to the listeners, is you have firewalls inside your organization that allow good people in and keep bad people out. You have to have those still. It doesn't mean that the perimeter is like doesn't need to be maintained, but what it does mean is that we have these crafty bad people out there who are trying to do more and more damage to our businesses by stealing things and shutting things down. And we have to be smarter. We have to understand this interconnected layer that we have and really understand the risk of each of those vendors and work together to mitigate and reduce that risk.
So, Ariel, how can the insurance industry help clients establish more effective vendor risk management programs to mitigate third-party cyber risk and navigate the evolving compliance requirements surrounding third-party cybersecurity?
Number one would be to work with cyber experts. With all due respect to the insurance industry, cyber is so complex. I'm a former chief information security officer. I've been in information technology for longer than I want to tell you. And you have to know a lot of things. You have to understand networking. You have to understand the complexity of interconnected systems, and the risk assessments should be done by professionals, and they should be done, in my opinion, not by the organization itself, but by someone else who's attesting to the fact that the stuff is control. The firms don't understand the questionnaires. They leave information out, and it can be misleading to the insurance company. I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose, but we have a 30% payout ratio in cyber insurance, and property and casualty is 5%. Why is that? It's because when you go to insure a nuclear power plant or a chemical factory, inspectors are brought in, and the inspectors are doing all of that for the insurance company. We need the same thing. We need the exact same thing. And I recommend that there's more collaboration between the cyber experts and the insurance companies in this regard.
So, Ariel, what do you hope readers will take away from your book?
Many things, but I guess I would sum it up to say that we hope that they will implement and mature their third-party risk programs to help themselves in the insurance industry and to ensure that their vendors have the right type of cyber hygiene. And what that means to me is that if you're an organization and this is your set of requirements for a secure program, your vendor has the same thing. Why would you expect less? You shouldn't. And that way we're all on the same playing field and we know what's expected and we know how to get there. And the book is designed to give them like a step-by-step approach of how to start one or how to baseline one and make one better and pull that all together for them.
This is so fascinating. This has been so interesting, so insightful. Ariel, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
It's my pleasure. It's very nice to speak with you, Lori. Thank you.
That was Ariel Evans, CEO of Cyber Intelligence for You and co-author of the book, Navigating Supply Chain Cyber Risk, a comprehensive guide to managing third-party cyber risk. For AM Best TV, I'm Lori Chortis.
Looking to get the full attention of the insurance industry? We have the platforms that will do just that. Whether it be AM Best TV, AM Best Audio, Best Review Magazine, or Best Day. Find out more by calling AM Best Advertising Sales at 908-439-2200, extension 5399, and have a great day.